Experimental Tropical Forest for giving me the opportunity to present the data of that little project in that webinar series. So, about the outline of the following webinar. So I will introduce me and also my research group where I embedded. I will talk about motivation and background of the project and the site where I placed the measurements and also the instrumentational setup. And of course, we will see some plots and figures with data and talk about what we see there or what how we interpret this data. And we'll conclude with summary and conclusions. So I am working in the Grassland Sciences Group, which is located at the Federal Institute of Technology in Switzerland, in Zurich, ETH Zurich. The Grassland Sciences Group does multidisciplinary research and focuses on the process and system-oriented understanding of plant and ecosystem physiology, functional plant diversity, and biogeochemistry in agroecosystems and forests, in particular in the biosphere and atmosphere, greenhouse gas exchange, in response to management and environmental drivers across spatial and temporal scales. We use classical ecological methods and further develop innovative tools such as stable isotope applications and micrometeorological measurements of trace gases in our observational and experimental studies. So that was actually cited from the webpage of our group. And this is me. I'm a research engineer, physicist, and electronic technician by training. And I'm one of 4 research engineers taking care that the scientists in our group and all over the world actually have access to continuous long-term data from various field stations that we are running in Switzerland. Besides that, we also assist our scientists in the experimental design of campaigns and mainly concerned about the technical aspects of our research. The head of our group is Professor Dr. Nina Buchmann, a well-known ecophysiologist. Our group is running basically 6 research sites across Switzerland in differently managed ecosystems. And we have 2 forest sites, 3 grassland sites along an altitudinal gradient, and 1 agricultural site. This is called the Swiss FluxNet, and we are also part of the global FluxNet network, where the core measurements are including greenhouse gas exchange measurement between the ecosystems and the atmosphere. And we also have a stable isotope laboratory and phytotrons. But let's move on to the project I did a couple of years ago in Hawaii and how that actually evolved. So after 10 years of service, Nina Buchmann permitted me to do a sabbatical in Hawaii. And yeah, for obvious reasons, I came to Hawaii. And when I told Werner Eugster, Nina's former deputy, about my sabbatical plans, he was super excited, encouraged me to investigate these unique ecosystems in lava tube openings that he had once seen on a Hawaii visit a couple of decades ago. But Werner sadly passed away actually during the time I was in Hawaii. And since Werner was not only a much valued colleague, but also a friend, this project gained importance for me also personally, kind of being a way to say goodbye to Werner from the other end of the world in the silence above Puʻuwaʻawaʻa. And of course, as I built meteo stations in Switzerland for more than 10 years and run them, being in a very different ecosystems and lava tubes and caves that we don't have in Switzerland, I was very curious and also keen to place a meteo station there and see what we actually measure. So I came up with research questions. What are the micrometeorological conditions at a lava tube entry, and how do they differ from the conditions in the surrounding area? So I don't know how familiar you are all with plant functioning and how does micrometeorology actually relate to the plants or the ecosystem. Plants are living organisms and have a metabolism. But in contrast to animals who need to eat, plants use sunlight and carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and water from the soil to synthesize their own sugar. And this process is called photosynthesis. But as soon as the plants strike roots, they cannot move anymore. Hence, the conditions where they are, where they grow, the conditions in their environment are crucial for the plant's viability. And one aspect of these conditions is the microclimate, given by a set of physical quantities such as air temperature, air pressure, humidity, the wind regime, or precipitation, or the soil moisture, and many more. And furthermore, plants don't have lungs, but they have stomata to control their gas exchange. And most plants must open and close their stomata during the daytime in response to changing conditions such as light intensity, humidity, and carbon dioxide availability or concentration. So here you see an open stoma, and here a closed stoma, for example, on a leaf. And as gas exchange happens passively via diffusion, an important fact is that plants cannot gain carbon dioxide from the atmosphere without simultaneously also losing water vapor. So it's always a trade-off if they can actually do photosynthesis or if they starve from dryness. So different plants are differently adapted to their environments. So micrometeorological conditions such as air temperature or moisture or solar radiation define one jigsaw piece of the niche that the plant community is actually occupying. And I don't know if there are any people from Switzerland, so I just have placed a wrap-up of lava tubes. Hawaiian people are familiar with them. We in Europe may be less familiar. So lava tubes form in active lava flows. And when the lava flows cease, there are eventually tubes that remain. And sometimes the ceilings collapse and form sinkholes and opening to the tubes. And these topographical features can provide habitats for very special ecosystems. And that's what I wanted to, that's where I wanted to measure the micrometeorological conditions. And lava tubes are very common in Hawaii and are also of cultural importance to the native Hawaiians. For example, they were used for collect drinking water or provided shelter and were or are still used for ceremonies or burials. So where did I actually take my measurements? So as you see, I found a suitable lava cave opening in the Puʻuwaʻawaʻa dry forest on the slope of the Hualalai volcano, which is, the volcano is up here and there is a slope down to the coast. And here you see the map of Big Island of Hawaii. And there is the Umi'i Manu lava cave, which is dated to an age of about 3 to 5,000 years, and is ranging from 1,900 down to 1,300 meters above sea level. It is said to be a single isolated tube with a large passage that can be walked It's a quite a big tube. The measurement site is around here and is located in a subalpine montane dry forest. The surrounding is dominated by mixed native trees and shrubs and non-native grasses. There are sheep and goats which are grazing there and posing pressure on the vegetation. And the time frame when I did the measurements is actually quite short for these kind of measurements, but my sabbatical was also limited in time, so I had to take down all the instrumentation again. It was from mid-May until mid-June 2022, so roughly 2 years ago. The climatology at the site from the climatology atlas. So it's modeled and it's said to be rather a dry site with only 650 millimeters rainfall per year and a temperature around 15 degrees Celsius. My measurements took place in between May and June here. So June is one of the driest months and around 15 degrees here. So here you see some images. This is the tube opening. Here you see the collapsed ceiling material. And here we have a verdant fern curtain actually covering the opening of the tube, which is facing the upslope. And this is the station in the surrounding area. Below this fern curtain was a quite thick soil layer with decomposed plant material, whereas here in the surrounding, I had a hard time to find a spot where I could bury a soil sensor actually. So the soil is extremely shallow here, and you see also it looks much drier with the grasses and the bushes and shrubs instead of the verdant green here inside the tube opening. So I placed 2 weather stations, so one actually with 2 substations in the cave opening. So this one is the cave outside station, and this is the cave inside station behind the fern curtain. So remember the colors, so you will see these colors also in the graphs and figures later on. And this is the reference station on the outside. And with these 2 stations, we hope to gain insight into the microclimate at the cave opening compared to the surrounding climate. In order to help you memorizing the colors, I made these little graphics, which also appear on the figures of the data that you can memorize or recall the colors. So this blue is the reference station. This is the outside, but in the sinkhole, and this is the inside cave station. And this is the view from above. Oops, that was a little bit too fast. Ryan Perroy from the University of Hawaii at Hilo took aerial imagery. So this is a 3D image of the whole area or part of it. The north arrow is more or less also along the slope. So upwards is upslope and this is downslope. And here you see the fern curtain. The cave is going more or less that direction. So there is another smaller sinkhole. And the fern is only on this side of the cave, but not on this side. So I placed the station here. So this is the outside station and the inside already covered by the ceiling. And there was the reference station, a couple of meters or 10th of meters next to the sinkhole. The instrumental setup was very simple. The core instrument is this weather station, the Atmos 41, which measures air temperature, air pressure, water vapor pressure, wind speed and direction, precipitation, and has also a global radiation sensor. But additionally, I placed a photosynthetic photon flux density sensor, which is a sensor that measures actually the flux of photons, which can potentially be absorbed by plants for their photosynthesis. And then the soil sensor, which is measuring the soil water content and soil temperature. And this was all logged by a data logger from Campbell Scientific. And as you can imagine, in that remote area, there was no mains power, so the whole station was solar powered and battery powered. But light availability is not an issue up there. So let's start with some results. And I just wanted to place a table with the climatology to figure out if the year was in some way exceptional, or if we are in the range of what is expected from the long-term means. And concerning air temperature, we are pretty much in the long-term range, and also concerning the relative humidity of the air and vapor pressure deficit, also slightly elevated. I will talk about vapor pressure deficit later on, because that's a very important variable, since it is a measure of atmospheric dryness and can also indicate the stress level of the plants in the ecosystem. The precipitation is slightly elevated, but I think it's highly variable from year to year as far as I've seen in the data. And it's also very, very local. So a few hundred meters above the slope, there can be much more rain than down the slope, because the gradients are so huge. So, and solar radiation is also within the range that could be expected. So solar radiation is, of course, dependent on the season. So where the sun is on the horizon, and also by cloud cover. So if more clouds, there is less light, obviously. And let's move on to first time series of solar radiation when we're talking about solar radiation. And just recall the colors again. So the blue graph here is the data from the reference station from the outside. And the orange colors is from the outside, but in the sinkhole. Sorry, I used outside. That's I want to use the reference for that station, not outside. Outside is actually this one, and inside is this one. And here we see the diurnal cycles. So there is sunlight during the day, but no light during the night. And the reference station has slightly higher radiation values than the station in the sinkhole. This is also because of the field of view of this station is much smaller than this one. So this one gets a little bit more light. And the green one, which is already somewhat in the cave, has only little light, or only indirect or diffuse light, which is hitting the sensor actually. But as you also can see, it is quite hard to see differences here, or where are the differences? Are there diurnal patterns that arise? And for this reason, I made plots with diurnal cycles. So I actually cut this time series into daily pieces and averaged them to actually see more the 24-hour cycle of the data averaged. And for example, I did this for the wind speed, because the wind speed and wind direction regime can give an impression on from where the air masses at our stations or at our ecosystems are actually coming from. And here we nicely see that during the night, the wind speeds are lower than during the day. And here we have two depressions, which I will talk about later. Around sunrise and sunset, we have very low wind speeds in the reference station in the surrounding area. And we also see that this diurnal cycle is damped, but it's also visible in the caves outside station, but hardly visible in the inside of the cave. So there is more or less a constant airflow in the inside of the cave, which does not have a diurnal pattern. And for the wind speeds and direction, I did something similar. So I averaged 3-hour periods for wind direction and wind speeds and did that for each station. So what we see here is only data for the reference station. So here is from 0 to 3 o'clock, 3 to 6 o'clock, and so on. And the colors here are the referring to the wind speeds. So yellow means greater than 3 meters per second, and towards blue and purple, it means that there are very low wind speeds. And here we nicely see at the reference station that during the night, the wind is coming from the south, as we see here. And during the day, during daylight conditions, the wind is coming from north. And also during the day with the elevated wind speeds that we have also nicely seen in that plot before here, in that region. And this is actually what we could expect. So remember that we are on a slope from the volcano down to the coast. So in the night we have cold air drainage from the higher altitudes. So the wind is coming from the volcano, which is sitting on the south and going towards the coast. And as soon as the sun is heating up the Earth's surface, that wind regime is actually changing. And convective flows evolve uphill. And the moment when this is actually changing or the wind direction is flipping is causing the depression that we have seen here and here. So here we only see the wind speed, but not the direction. But the direction that we have compiled here can give us an impression on why this wind speed regime is looking like this. But interestingly, when we are moving on to the cave station, we don't see this flip in wind direction. We see that during the day, the variation in wind direction is a little bit higher, and also the wind speeds are a little bit higher, indicating that there is more turbulence in the cave, and also quite some eddies from the outside, from the surrounding area, are entering the sinkhole, but predominantly from one direction. And if we move on to the inside of the cave, this is even less pronounced. So there is basically no diurnal cycle. So the flow is always coming with very low wind speeds though, but constantly from the south direction, meaning the airflow is mainly coming from the tube. So the tube is, as you remember maybe, is going upwards. So there is a downflow of air from the lava tube, which is exiting the tube at the entrance through the fern curtain. And let's move on to more diurnal cycles of the other meteorological variables, such as air temperature and the radiation on the left side. And in the radiation now, we have averaged all the days that we have seen before in the time series. And we nicely see here in the reference station, when the sun is rising over the flanks of Mauna Loa, there is a steep increase of sunlight. And then clouds evolve, and then this is damped, and eventually the sun is set in the evening. And in the cave, in the outside of the sinkhole of the fern curtain, we see that the cave provides shade until 9 o'clock more or less, and then the sun is also hitting the sensor, and the values are similar here. But inside the cave, there is only little light hitting the sensor. And this is also somehow reflected in the air temperature. So whereas the air temperature is rising rapidly in the reference station, there is a little less rapid rise. So it stays a little bit cooler in the sinkhole, but after some time the air is mixed with the outside air more or less, and the temperature are reaching more or less the same temperatures as in the reference station. But also again, in the cave, it remains cool, around 13 to 14 degrees Celsius. Only a slight increase during the day is visible, but also indicating that there is not much mixing with the outside air in the cave. And on the right side here, we have the panels for the humidity and the vapor pressure deficit. So as I said, the vapor pressure deficit is a measure of dryness. So the air can hold a certain amount of water, and the water has a partial pressure at that saturation point, and everything which is less, if you have less water available in the air, there is the partial pressure of the water is lowered, and these pressure deficit is a measure of dryness of the atmosphere, and is dependent on temperature and the available humidity in the air. And here we see that the vapor pressure deficit is rising at sunrise, but is also already elevated in the night. Whereas in the sinkhole, it is quite low, or in the cave, it is around 0, so always around condensing conditions. And the conditions remain favorable for the plants until noon. And then we have the mixing of the air, and the air is mixed with the outside. And in the night again, there is more cold air cooling in the sinkhole again. And as I said, I have also placed sensors in the soil, and I want to relate that to the precipitation measurements. This one is the sensor in the reference station in the shallow soil, and this one is the sensor in the below the fern curtain. So the absolute values are not so meaningful because I didn't calibrate the sensors for the soil, because that is quite a complex procedure. So the absolute value is not so meaningful, but the dynamics are very different. So as we see, it's something like a diurnal cycle in the reference station, and we also clearly see the precipitation events which lead to more moisture in the soil also. We see that here and here. We don't see that particularly in the cave entrance. So indicating that this soil is more or less saturated to the most extent with moisture. However, I am not sure if these diurnal cycles in soil moisture are actually related to the diurnal cycles in the precipitation. There seems to be a little precipitation every morning. Could also be dew formation, but this is hard to distinguish. And you also see here a precipitation event which was not measured by the rain gauge. So here we have a malfunction of the rain gauge, and I excluded the data from the analysis. And I also measured the air pressure, and that leaves me with an open question, and I will show you quickly. Here we see the pressure variations or large-scale variations in the atmosphere, and then on top of that we have that little variation, which I associate to atmospheric tidal variations of the atmospheric pressure, which is related to the thermal heating of the sun. And to see this the difference, I also did diurnal cycles, but I had to normalize it to always start at 0 at the beginning of the day. And then here we see these nice 12-hourly tidal pressure variation during the day. And we also see that the sensor at the reference station and at the outside of the cave are nicely following each other. But inside the tube during the day, actually at sunrise until sunset, we have a slightly elevated pressure, air pressure in the cave. And if I plot only the difference between the cave outside station and the reference and the cave inside respectively, this can also be nicely seen here, even more pronounced. And I don't have an explanation for this behavior, but it's very interesting that this is so clearly visible here in these diurnal cycles. So this is already all the data that I have. Of course, I'm sure that there could be more analysis done on that, but so far, let's recall the research questions about the conditions in the lava tube entry and the difference from the surrounding area. And I can summarize that there is a constant downdraft of cool and moist air in the cave. And the influence of the cave at the opening is bigger in the morning hours. So in the afternoon hours, the air in the cave is already well mixed. So there is not the big difference between the reference station and the sinkhole. The cave is providing a moist and cool environment with damped diurnal cycles at the opening. And also the cave's microclimate is greatly decoupled from the surrounding area. So we don't have diurnal cycles within the cave, but outside. And the Umi'i-Manu lava cave, with its openings, provides a variety of microhabitats, but not only for plants, but also for microbes and animals. And with these impressions, I close my talk for now. So mahalo for listening. Thank you very much. And I want to acknowledge especially Ryan Peroy from the University of Hawaii at Hilo for a lab space, truck access, the aerial imagery, and all the invaluable support he gave me during all of my sabbatical. And also JP Price of the University of Hawaii, who accompanied me to the site. And of course, the Hawaiian Experimental Tropical Forest for permitting me to measure in this very special area, and also the ETH Environmental Sciences Department and the Human Resources Department for giving me the opportunity to do a sabbatical in Hawaii, which was a great opportunity for me. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you very much, Philip, for sharing with us. We're going to open it up for any questions. I don't currently see any in the chat, but if folks that are on line right now want to ask any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and you can start your video and chime in whenever you feel. But that was really fantastic. Thank you again, Philip. And if there are no questions, I'd just like to say that this would be so intriguing to see the differences between some of these tubes, depending on what side of the island that they were on. So I would be so excited to see if someone continued this research across the Aina.
And maybe just let me say, so if someone is interested in the data, I'm more than happy to share them and also talk about them if you can use it for your research or just for your interest. It's I'm more than open to share the data.
That's really generous of you, Philip. And yeah, if anyone that is online right now, or if you know of anyone else that would be interested, feel free to reach out to us at the HETF and we can happily connect you with Philip. No problem. I'm going to drop the HETF feedback form one more time in the chat, just in case anyone is interested in giving us feedback on our webinars, questions, comments, suggestions, so that we're able to make these webinars the best that they can be. We always look at the feedback form. So thank you anyone who does fill that out. And thank you again, Philip. It was a pleasure seeing your data and really beautiful images. And, your graphs are fantastic as well. Our next webinar is going to be happening on February 14th with Kupono Aguar, and he will be talking about seed dispersal by feral pigs in Hawaiian forests. So I just want to say mahalo again, Philip, for joining us today, and thank you everyone in attendance. We really appreciate you folks. With that, I will stop recording.